You know?
Well, I think that's an important sort of framework as a professional, which is, you know, a career is generally a series of obstacles presented. And you've got to look at these obstacles and you have to say, what's the opportunity? You know, and the other thing I want to call out is sort of like your formalist mind and approach, structured, but you don't become didactic and get stuck in that. And what you do is you sit there and build in flexibility. And I think that that's the hallmark. Like when you can have structure and flexibility, like I actively talk about this a lot at Boom, in the marketing as well as the editorial, having the structure of knowing where you're going and what you're going to do, and then having the ability to recognize the terrain that you're in and adapt professionally is incredibly powerful. Because I really think those are the two gears that the world lives in.
It's really useful. I mean, like, especially like it's with the chaos of something like Marvel when you got this big multi-connected universe. It's so, I mean, there's all manner of stories you can tell because it's there's nothing I quite like being outside a pub on Friday night and shouting down corrections down a phone because something's gone wrong and it all turns out fine. You know, like it's an adventure. And I've done all these sort of books. Like my Avatar books are starting to come out. The other thing that happened at Marvel was they went to like 3-month double shipping, basically.
Right.
And that was the reason. And it basically was like a 5-year hole in my creator-owned work because I planned to do three books at Marvel, basically, which is quite a lot. And suddenly those 3 books have become 6 books.
Woo!
You know what I mean? Or 5 or 6. And I'm like, oh, right, okay, crunch. And even, you know, I said that even that, as I said earlier, I was still not at my limit. You know what I mean? They were like, it was 18 issues a year, so it's basically 5 books. And this is doable, you know, especially because, you know, I'm a decade younger than. But this is like adventure. We're doing all these books. But I am getting like, okay, this has been really fun doing supporting stuff. But like to be the sort of writer I want to be, I need to like clear a space and swing for something. And that's kind of like where partially that's where Journey to Mystery came from. Like Journey to Mystery was kind of me thinking, okay, let's see if I can do like a book potentially for me. Like this is basically a pop Vertigo book at Marvel. And I was always aware that was a model I still occasionally apply to my career. I'm like, okay, I basically do 2 books at once. One which is the pop book that proves I'm not an effing weirdo, and then there's the utter weird book which does prove, oh no, he is a weirdo. You know what I mean? They're the 2 work for hire books I have at any one time. And Uncanny X-Men was the hello, I'm playing the main stage of Glastonbury. This is pop. I can do a superhero book and it's fine, even though occasionally you get an I did an entire episode about Dostoevsky. Why would I do that? And then you get
because Dostoevsky's amazing.
He's amazing. That was like it was the issue with Dustin Weaver art as well. Honestly, it's one of my
wow.
So good. Dustin Weaver's amazing. I love him.
He's incredible and a wonderful person.
Yeah. And Journey to Mystery, which is very much more okay, I'm going to do something a bit more like it's a pop gaming story, basically.
Yeah.
And finding the rhythm between those 2 led to me, okay, I want to do something absolutely hermetically sealed. And that was led to Young Avengers. So people asked me to do Young Avengers. I had to be talked into it a bit because it felt a bit too obvious in some ways. And also, what's the other one? I guess it's also the fact that the original Young Avengers run was so great, but it was such a classic superhero story. There's no way I would do that, you know. So it was like, you know, they were looking for hostile. They were looking for like an interesting hostile takeover, like a real reimagining. So me and the idea was, okay, let's do a book like, let's treat this book like we own it. Like let's pretend that Young Avengers let's pretend that Young Avengers is actually Phonogram 4 or something, you know.
Wow.
So like so much of what that book was, can you do a pop book at Marvel? And the answer is, no, not really. But you know, you could do something that has a lot of energy. You know what I mean? Like people really responded to that book in a way which, I mean, it was a medium seller, but like it sold, but it got very good reviews, and very clearly set up for Wicked Divine. So it's kind of like halfway through Young Avengers, I had the idea of that was the year my dad died, unfortunately, which gave the inspiration for wicdiv. And I sent this mail to Jamie halfway through saying, this is it. So I tell him about wicdiv because the plan was to actually go and do Phonogram afterwards.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
but it at the moment for like, well, there were two reasons. One of it was like Young Avengers is about the future. You know, it's about doing new things. Us going immediately doing the old thing betrays that. Two, Phonogram never sells. It's like it will never sell. We've got literally eyes on us for the first time in our entire career. Let's try to do something that isn't stupid.
Capitalize on it.
And this is like, because it was the thing we never got to do. I always remember like me and Rick Remender in a car talking about Phonogram and Fear Agent being defeated by comics. The idea we're trying to do ongoing books, and it's like, you know, Phonogram succumbed to comics after 13 issues. It's survived by Kieron Gillen and Jamie McKelvey. You know, we were a generation of writers who never got to do her ongoing books. The exception being Jason Aaron.
Right.
Actually, obviously Kirkman, but that's slightly different. And Brian K. Vaughan. But like that kind of, these writers are very clearly informed by that 90s Vertigo stuff.
Yes.
And we have the idea of that 50, 60, 70 issue run as our thing. That's what counts as being a creator for us. And we never got to do it. So in that moment with wicdiv and the end of Young Avengers, we realized this is our best chance to try to launch a book that does well enough to do that. This is our one shot to go all M&M for a second. And that was always the thing. It's like, okay, let's go for it. And wicdiv was very explicitly this. I mean, a few years earlier, I made the joke that we should relaunch Phonogram and like Ultimate Phonogram and do it with like all the very pretentious stuff we'll take out and we'll just do it direct and emotional. And to some degree, wicdiv is a bit Ultimate Phonogram, as in it's kind of like Phonogram with the specificity removed and a lot of other stuff plugged in. And obviously the formalisms is took way up. And it's like, you know, wicdiv's like this 5-year journey into it's like a degree course in some ways, as it starts you here and then takes you across what is clearly a planned 5 years. And it's me and Jamie, you know, we spent like 11 years before we got to do that book. But it's that kind of like, here's this big statement of like, okay, this is how we think a monthly comic and comics could act. And we did, you know, we, especially after working in house at like Marvel, the complete control was very important to us. So in that position, like, can we pull it off? And then,
well, you're in this highly structured environment where you're not calling the shots, it's being delivered to you, right? Here's the problem, solve it. Here's the problem, solve it. We need, you know, I can order one more, I can order one more. Okay, I'll order 3 more. And you're functioning within that framework and then getting out. And you know, this might go back to, and this will get a little controversial. This goes back to, you know, the Catholic school kid, right? Where it's like structure, structure, structure. And then you're like, freedom, you know, like I get to call my own shots. Don't tell me what to do. I'm going to go do my own thing. I mean, it's massively liberating. And then I think one of the brilliant, I'll be a publisher for a second. One of the brilliant things that I think about not doing Phonogram at that moment is that what it does is it deputizes the Phonogram fans, right? Because they get to be the messengers for wicdiv. Right? Because idiomatically, it's an urban book. I would go so far as to say urbane book, if I can say that, and then supernatural, right? So you have all of the stacking of, so sort of the people that love Phonogram can go out and be your emissaries because they know what's coming, right? And there's very few commercial moments where you see sort of Phonogram is Phonogram and wicdiv is wicdiv, and they're very different books, but there's enough similarities. And the gap in between sort of builds up the thirst, right? And you're in this zone where you're building up your commercial name through Marvel, and it creates this really unique moment that can catapult you. And you had done the work, you and Jamie, of course. Jamie's brilliant, genius. And so that moment really, I think, conspires where it all comes together. And, you know, now we've previously been talking a lot about Kismet, and I think this is more than that, right? Because it's like you've done the work and you have fed the audience through Phonogram, and that audience is starved. And there's this, you know, it's the, I'm going to keep quoting Malcolm Gladwell, but it's like the tipping point in one of his earliest books of like, you have these evangelists that are in the zone and they're in the shops, and many of them are the store owners that are sitting there doing the hand sell, telling people, you know, you need to get on this. And of course, you have this tremendous, phenomenal moment with Eric Stevenson brilliantly creating the New Image Renaissance,